Hi, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast, People Helping People. I'm Shara Goswick, your host. My guest today is Glen Lubbert. Glen is the co founder of Stamina Lab, which is a company that helps people change their behavior, not by focusing on what's wrong, but finding what they're doing right and helping them build on that. He walked me through an exercise that he would normally do with someone he's working with. And it's interesting the way he can help you change your perspective and look at your situation completely differently. I loved hearing about his company. I think if you're an athlete or a coach or someone you think might benefit from these services, I encourage you to reach out to him. He was great to talk to, and I know he can help. Thanks for being here. Glenn, thank you for talking to me today. I love meeting new people and learning about the great way they are helping. What you're doing is very unique with the Stamina Lab, and I love it. I think it's very cool. But for people that don't know what that is, tell everybody who you are and what the Stamina Lab is.
Yes, well, thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm very excited to share about what we do at Stamina Lab, which is we have a behavior change platform for health and performance, and we like to say that you are your own lab, you are your own experiment, and you are your own best coach. And really, what that comes down to is that we use a evidence-based, solution-focused approach to behavior change. And this approach is unique in the way that we go about it because you don't need to know what the problem. We don't need to know what the problem is. We don't have to go down the problem route, and then obviously we can talk more about it. But it just is so much more joyful to go about change, where we usually have the guilt and shame of beating ourselves up because we're not changing or we keep quote unquote failing.
Right.
In this approach, and this is like I said, it's 40 years of thousands of research studies, 100 meta-analysis. This actually works, and it's joyful to do. So I'm so excited to share with your listeners.
Yeah. So who is this for? Is this somebody, an athlete? Like, is this for people that are wanting to compete or, be in the best shape? Who is this for?
This works for everyone. So I mean, it's ideal for those who are just trying to have change happen, and they get frustrated, and they have that despair in some cases, or just frustration. Um, and that so it works ideal for that because that's where you get the most paradigm shift. We have a client that recently said it's a 180-degree mindset shift. He was a CEO of a company, and sold it, and he was doing fantastic, but struggling in the basics. And he's like, felt like I was on defense my whole life, and now I feel like I'm on offense.
Oh, wow.
And so it works ideally for that, but at the same time, it works if you're, like I said, he was a CEO of a great company, and it also works if you're performing at your best. I just ran a marathon last week, and I use these same principles through that whole process because I have now mad respect because it was my first marathon. Mad respect for everyone who's done one because
Yeah.
the whole process is a test in you know getting up when it's hard, and the
Yeah.
motivation, and just the self-doubt or any of the challenges that come along with it. I mean, it's all that's what I mean, I understand that's why people do it now because,
Yes.
because of all that, because you have to really work through that, and this approach helps with that because it it shows you where you have evidence that you're already on the path to success.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what's so powerful here is the questions that we ask in this approach, the questions that you can ask yourself in this approach, it aren't about, how do we fix what's wrong? It's
Right.
about looking for where we are already on the path to success. And that's what gains the momentum. And even if you're, just trying to get off, just doing some of the basics and just trying to get off the sofa, or like I said, doing something big like that, you all still need that push and that momentum. And how do you get that without beating yourself up and saying, that this is giving me some of that grief and whatnot. You do it by looking for evidence where you're already on the path to change. So I've got tons of examples I can share, but
Oh, yeah, definitely.
that's kind of the quick view of it. Yeah.
I love that. I know that you were a Division I athlete at one time. Do you feel like, what your training and what you learned during that time has helped you doing what you're doing now?
I think what it did do was um spark my interest in it because
Yeah.
as a Division I athlete, I'm you're 20 some years old, so I just do what I'm told. But
Yeah.
then, going out to start I just did multiple startups and work with my big grew my company to 50 employees. And what I realized is that, okay, wait a second, how do we affect change inside the organization if we have our goals and our objectives? But how do we have to move? We always have to move people along.
Right.
So how do we move people along in the organization? I also learned that what we had to have is not just coaching for how you do things in the organization, but people are real people. So their real lives that come into the workplace.
Yeah.
So, we how can we coach people in some technique to help them solve their problems, but be able to show up at their best selves and then do the things that we wanted to do to reach their goals. So after I sold my last company, I really went down this route and said, okay, wait a second, whatever the coaches were doing when I was an athlete was good. And I had this big need inside the organization. So there is a way to do this. So
Yeah.
let me start asking, what what affects change? How do we impact change? And yes, when I met my partner, Dr. Deborah Tepelo, she's a PhD and mentor and fantastic in this approach. And so, whatever I'm telling you, definitely I've learned from her, and our advisors are fantastic experts in this approach. And what I have taken like that out is coaches are fantastic, from whether they're
Oh,
with
yeah.
Division One coach or coaches, the coaches that we train. We train a ton of coaches. That's one of our key parts of our business is training coaches, medical practices, fitness experts, anyone who's working to affect change in other people's lives. It's even leadership people. We
Yeah.
all there's so many people that we're trying to affect change, and you can't make someone change. But how do you ask the questions to have better conversations that lead to better follow through and better outcomes? And that's what we train people in. And I think the biggest thing I say from that, the answer to your question was, I didn't know how they did it,
Yeah.
how my coaches do it, but I knew it was impactful. And so learning that approach and learning this approach, which is so different than the traditional approach of root cause analysis. Like, let's go back and let's figure out, okay, what's not working, or why did you do something? This is the traditional approach. And this is what
Right.
leads to the guilt and shame, where you say, all right, that I have a challenge. I'm trying to change this bad habit. The traditional approach is, okay, well, let's look at what's triggering you. Okay, it's that trigger. Okay, let's figure out what caused this pain or this issue that's in your life. And then we're going to replace it with something else, or we're going to come to terms with that piece. Okay, well, there's some validity to that, but you kind of get into a whack-a-mole situation. So one of the examples I like to give is, we had a client who said, okay, trying to reduce how much sugar I eat. We're all trying to reduce how much sugar we eat.
Right.
So, it leads to a higher A1C, and obviously diabetes is a big deal. One of the top killers in the country. So, it's very common. We're all trying to do that. So,
Mhm.
um, they came to us and said, "Oh, since the last time we met, I failed. I had a half a pint of ice cream the other night. I just feel really bad about this. I'm really trying to do this, but I had this thing that happened." And traditional approach is, okay, well, what caused you to eat that? What was the trigger that caused you to eat that half a pint of ice cream? Let's figure that out. And when we do that, then the next time that happens, let's come up with a different action that could be better for you, that would help you with that when that stress came up. Well, you kind of get into one, I have to explain all over again the stress that came up again. So now I
Right.
gotta relive that stress again, that brought
Right.
to me. So now I feel bad. And then it's almost a whack-a-mole situation because, well, maybe that exact trigger doesn't happen, and then something else similar or different, or whatever. Then use all these triggers. So you're playing whack-a-mole and trying to figure out different ways to approach that. This is where people struggle and fail, because they're just trying to constantly do that.
Yeah.
Context changes, the day of the week, the weekends, the weekdays are different triggers. Weather, season, people around you, the environment, anything in the environment could be different. It could be you could be traveling, stressor at home, stressor at work. So I have to come up with thousands of these different new strategies, and that's an
Right.
impossible thing to do. So our approach it solves that because we don't need to know that. And lots of times when people come to us for coaching with our team of coaches, they'll say, "Okay, well, I think you need to know the whole backstory of why this is happening." Nope, don't need to know the backstory. So what we said to the guy who had the half a pint of ice cream, we said, instead of why did you have that half a pint, we said, well, what kept you from eating that entire pint?
Huh.
Well, I didn't eat the entire pint because I realized I'm trying to reduce my sugar, and, once I had a little bit of a few bites, I was like, "Okay, that's good. I didn't need any more, and, I'm still trying to do this." Now, all we did was highlight all the evidence that says they're still on the path to change. They're still on the path to being who they want to be. And now, instead of all that, I don't have to relive the guilt and I don't have to relive the stressor. I don't have to have the guilt and shame. Like, wait, no, I did something here. I did something. I only had half a pint of ice cream, not a full pint or not, 2
Right.
pints or whatever. And you can substitute ice cream for whatever you want, whatever you're doing that you think is, bad. No, you brought to bear, the capacity to change in some way. Let's highlight that. Let's point that out, and then the next time something happens, doesn't matter what the stressor is, you remembered you had the capacity to change. You remembered where you did something hard there, you stopped at a half a pint. And the next time you might still have that half a pint, but you'll remember, "Hey, no, wait, remember what I said? Why I did this?" Yes. Or maybe you don't even have a half a pint, or maybe you do have a whole pint, but then you can ask yourself the same question, "Why didn't I go get a second pint?" Uh,
Right.
and either way, you're just still trying to highlight where you already have the capacity to change because that keeps the little bit of momentum,
Yeah.
going. It takes away the guilt and shame.
So it's a mindset shift. It's a complete mindset shift because when you asked that question, I thought I would never would have looked at it like that. I would have been the same way. Like, I can't believe I just ate a half pint of ice cream. So that's awesome. I love that. I know that you focus on energy, focus, and resilience in working with people. Why are these so important starting points?
Yeah, well, resilience is really what we're trying to demonstrate with these questions that we're asking, that where are we still resilient? What keeps us on this path to change, and how do we sustain the energy? We say energy, but it's momentum, movement.
Right.
Where do how do we sustain that? And that's by asking these questions. If you get stuck in anxiety or overwhelm about what's coming up in the future, that stagnates that energy. And
Mhm.
you ask yourself, "Well, what's one thing I can do, even the smallest thing that would tell
Yeah.
me I'm still on the path to being the person I want to be, on that path to goal?" Because that gives you just that little bit of energy, that little bit of momentum, and that's what we're just trying to continue to compound on top of each other. And so you could focus on all the challenge and the problem, but that's still not going to move yourself forward. If you're
Right.
struggling in the past, and you say to yourself, this is the resilience part where you say, because you're beating yourself up for something, and no matter how bad it is, the question we would ask is, how are you managing or even coping to deal with that problem? Because just the fact that you're managing and coping, you're having a conversation with me, you got out of bed, whatever. That's being a detective in your own life. And that's
Right.
evidence that you do have resilience, that you are doing something. And it's always in the doing that
Yeah.
we get that energy, we get that momentum. There's a metaphor we have where we say, the cab driver pulls up to the curb, and you get into the cab, and the cab driver says, "Hi, well, welcome. Where do you wanna go?" "Well, I don't wanna go over there because I get frustrated with that, and I don't wanna go 'cause I'm not good at that, and I don't wanna go over there because, that's a problem. I always fail over there." "Okay, that's great, but I can't pull right from this curve until you tell me where you want to go."
Right.
You have to give your brain a destination, but it's in the doing. Give
Yeah.
it a doing, and then ask yourself, what difference will that make for you? Because the what
Yeah.
difference will makes it for you is makes it really intrinsic inside you. What difference? And you can ask that question, what difference it will make multiple times, because when it's times are tough and the struggle is there and you're not feeling that willpower, remember, okay, it's not about this one action about stopping eating that ice cream. It's about what difference will that make for me? What would other people notice if I made that decision? And
Yeah.
that's makes it much larger, more intrinsic to beyond a goal, beyond
Right.
an A1C number, beyond, your blood work or your data on your app or your watch or whatever. It's what difference will it make for you? That's what connects more to your values, and that's where
Sure.
you get that deep motivation.
Absolutely. I know stress is probably something you hear a lot from people when you're talking to them, and it shows up different for different people. People manage it different ways. A lot of people stress eat. If I'm stressed out, I don't eat. So I know it's different for everybody, but what are some overlooked ways that it affects people that they don't realize?
Well, I mean, the impacts are, they could pick, I mean, numerous impacts, and like I said, it doesn't matter
Right.
what the impact is or why it's causing you the stress. The question I would ask is, what do you want to feel instead of stress? Your cab driver just says, "You just told me I'm stressed. I don't want to feel stressed." Okay, great, but I can't take you anywhere until you tell me what do you want to feel instead. And sometimes we don't ask ourselves, or oftentimes we don't ask this question, and we say, "Oh, I'm stressed. I'm overworked. I'm overwhelmed." Okay, well, the brain needs a destination. So, what do you
Right.
want to feel instead? Now, some people might want to feel, I want to feel calm. I want to feel rested. You have your own definition of what you want to feel instead. I want to feel connected with my family. What is that?
Yeah.
You have to ask yourself that question. We rarely ask ourselves this question. When we coach people, we see that all the time. When we ask that question, well, what do you want instead? This is a key question in the solution focused approach because it
Mm.
tells you the destination. What
Right.
do you want instead? And people are like, I never thought about what I want instead. And once you do that, again, what difference will that make if you feel calm or connected with your family or whatever your instead is? Okay, so let's just use calm for example. I want to feel calm. Okay, well, is there a time when you felt calm? No, I've never felt calm. Okay, all right. Okay, so when is there a time when you felt less stressed?
Mhm.
Alright, well, because it's everything fluctuates, and you
Right.
get okay, even just a little bit less stressed, and because some people say, "No, I'm always stressed." I'm like, even a little bit less stressed might be
Surely.
yeah. And if not, we do a thing called scaling, and we'll say, "Alright, so you wanna feel calm. Okay, what would that look like? What would you notice you'd be doing if you felt calm? Okay, oh, okay, what difference would that make? Okay, okay, so if and you say you feel stressed. Well, you want to role play a little bit on this?
Sure, sure.
Okay, so if what would you want to feel instead of stress?
Relaxed.
Relax. Okay,
Yes.
so what would you notice you'd be doing if you were relaxed?
Well, when I'm stressed, I find myself tensing my whole body. Like I feel like I'm squeezing my stomach and I find myself like that all the time and I have to tell myself to relax, just let go.
Okay, so what would you be? What would you be saying? Let go. What else would you be doing to relax?
Probably breathing deeper.
Breathing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would your family or friends, I don't know if you have children, how would or even your pet, what would they notice you be doing if you felt relaxed?
Maybe not so busy. Always
So
doing
busy?
being able to
Okay.
sit more.
Okay, taking a breath, rolling your shoulders, sitting more. What's instead of busy? What would that what be? Because you can't be
Sitting.
negative, you have to be something.
I would be sitting still. I would be
Sitting
reading or
still?
sitting still and not up thinking I have to get everything done all at
Yeah,
once.
and so if you were, take labels, sit still, um, uh, take a breath, calm your knees, calm your shoulders. I mean, we could obviously go longer on that, but what difference would that make if you were able to do that?
I could probably focus better on things
Focus
I need to
better?
focus better, yeah.
And, what difference would that make if you were able to focus?
I would get the things done that need to get done.
Things that gets
My priorities would probably change.
yeah, priorities would change, okay,
Yeah.
and what difference would it make if your priorities changed?
I would be more effective as a wife and a mom and, taking care of my home and the people around me.
Yeah, and what difference would it make if you were, able to take more care of the people around you and be what better wife and mom?
I think I would be more fulfilled. I
More
would
fulfilled.
feel better about being able to do all that.
Yeah, and so, what do you notice after I asked all that questions?
I feel more relaxed than I did when you started asking good questions.
So on a scale of 1 to 10,
Yeah.
10 being that world we just described where you were able to sit still, be more focused, be a better mom, and be show up for your family better, and be more fulfilled. That being a 10,
Mhm.
and 1 being the opposite.
Yeah.
Where would you fall on that scale?
Right now, probably like a 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what makes you a 5 and not a 4?
Because I'm aware of when I'm
You're
doing
aware?
those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
What else?
um, I know I've come a long way from
Come a long
the way I
way.
used to be. Yeah. I
Yeah.
used to be a lot worse.
Yeah. So you're aware, you come a long way. What
Mhm.
else?
Um, I think I give myself more grace now than I have in the past because I know how far I've come. So,
You give yourself more grace, you're aware, you know you've come far.
mhm.
Um, anything else that makes you a 5 and not a 4?
I know my confidence has
Okay.
increased, so I feel better about myself than I
Better
did in the
yourself.
past. Yeah.
So you come a long way, you feel better about yourself, and give yourself more grace. What do you notice after uh, said all those things that I repeated back what you said? What do you notice
Right.
now?
It's like I can look back and, yeah, I have come a long way.
Yeah.
I am a lot more confident than I was, and I have come a long way, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. So, if you wanted to move closer, if you're gonna we're moving to that 10, and but 10 so far away, because we're a 5. But what if you were moving from a 5 to a 6? Now, I don't need you to get to a 6, but just to say, if you were moving from a 5 to a 6 in the next
Mhm,
24 hours or the next week, what would
mhm.
you notice you'd be doing? Even the smallest thing that tell you that you were moving from a 5 to a 6.
The sitting still is a big deal for me because I can think of 1,000 things that I should be doing,
Mhm.
and they don't all necessarily have to be done right this minute.
So what's something that you could be doing that's even easy for you that you could be doing in the next 24 hours that tells you you're moving from a 5 to a 6? An easy thing.
Take taking 5 or 10 minutes just to sit, not
Okay.
not to make a list, not to be on my iPad, not to do anything, just sit.
So just sitting.
Yeah.
Where would you be doing that?
Probably right over there in my
Sitting
office.
right over there. When would you be doing it?
In the morning.
Can you say you were doing right in there next to your podcasting, doing it in the morning. How would you be doing it? What would be the environment? What would be things around you that you'd be doing?
It would be quiet.
Quiet.
I don't always wake up before my husband, but when I do, I like to come in here and have my coffee, I pray
Yeah.
or read
Having
my
your coffee.
Bible, and I just like the quiet, to sit
Yeah.
in quiet.
Reading. So you'd be in the morning. You'd be right there. You'd have your coffee. You'd be
Mhm,
being connecting spiritually.
mhm,
Um, okay. So what we did there was we looked at what ideal future was. We
mhm.
identified where things you're already doing so that it shows
Yeah.
there's evidence that you're already on the path to that 10 person that is calm or that is focused, that is fulfilled, that is showing up for their family. That person's inside you. You're already moving in that direction. And and I asked you what would move you to the 5 to 6 and put a time frame on it, the next 24 hours, so that
Mhm,
you would do it. And I also asked you to describe everything that would be happening around you. So because our brain
mhm,
doesn't know the difference between the past, present, or the future. So the fact that we describe that, your brain has already done that. And now traditionally when you're trying to set up a goal, we set up the goal and we say what the goal is. All right. But
mhm.
then we have all the things that will block us: time, money, people around us, weather, the day of the week, whatever. Our brain comes up with tons of excuses just to prevent us from doing
Right.
that. But when we've described it in that much detail, maybe I would even go more detail in a
Yeah.
session, or our coaches would, and and then you've already done it. And so what we like to say, there's many paths to the same river.
Mm,
So that means now that we've described it, the brain's very creative. It's going to come up with ways because it wants to get there. We've already described
Yeah.
what it is, and maybe it's not exactly the way you described it, but it knows that, hey, I've been sitting there. I was calm. I was with my coffee. I was feeling connected to a larger part of my universe, and so it knows it. It feels it intrinsically. So maybe you're not at your house. Maybe you're at your in-laws' house, or you're on vacation, or you're traveling, or whatever. You know that that is a space that you want to get to, and it knows what it
Yeah.
feels like, and it'll figure out, okay, well, I can't do all that, but I can sit here for a second or two, whatever. That's the idea. Is that you've experienced it. You know there's many paths to get there. The brain knows that there's many paths to get
Mm.
there, and you've already given yourself evidence, and you're always looking for evidence of where, okay, well, maybe I can't do everything. Maybe the morning passed and I didn't do it, but what's one thing I could do, even the smallest thing that still
Right.
shows me that I'm on the path to that 10 person I want to be.
Yeah.
And that's the point. Is many paths to
Yeah.
that same river, but we just described one so that way you would
Right.
your brain knows what it feels like. We've already been there. You've already feel calm,
Yeah.
because we've already done that, and so it'll want to get there, somehow,
Yeah.
some way, and so
That's
it
awesome.
at some point in the day, you can always ask yourself, and people use this with exercise too. I'm like, "All right, well, it's cold, it's raining, or snowing, depending where you're at. Can't go out and do my walking or my exercise, or, um, or you may be a little. I got injured during my marathon training. Maybe you get a little injured. Okay, well, what's one thing I could still do that tells me I'm still on the path to that person? In case of my injury, like, all right, well, let me watch some videos about um, the marathon, and maybe I can get some strategy training in,
Sure.
or maybe I could do a little bit of rehab exercises. But that tells me, hey, I'm still on the
Yeah.
path to that goal I'm trying to reach, or that
That is
person I'm
so
trying to be.
good. I love that. I love that. Sometimes that's what we need is to change our mind just to get a different perspective. That helps tremendously. For somebody that's listening right now that feels stuck, what advice besides contacting you and being part of your program, what advice could you give, like one thing that they could do to make some changes?
Well, say that there is a lot of on our website, and there on our Instagram and YouTube. There's tons of videos that we've recorded, so there's
Yeah.
great resources for people to go dig into more of this. But again, the question you want to ask yourself is, you can't you can't do something with a negative.
Right.
You can't be, just because you don't want to be stressed, or you don't want to eat bad food, or you don't want to drink, or you don't want to whatever the don't is. Our brain doesn't hear the word don't. So I say, don't eat cake, don't eat cake. It only knows what cake is. It doesn't know
Right.
what not cake is.
Yeah.
So when every time you say don't eat cake, it just feels the cake. It tastes the cake. It smells the cake. So, yeah, and so it's saying, "I don't wanna be stressed, I don't wanna be stressed." It only knows the feelings, the emotions, the interception of stress.
Right.
So you have to give yourself the goal. You have to tell the cab driver
Yeah.
where to go. Ask you, "What do you want instead?" So I think that's the instead question is the
That's
number one
good.
thing I would
Yeah.
ask everyone to consider, is what do they want instead? And then what difference will that make?
That is awesome. I love that. Is there anything I haven't asked you about that you want to touch on before we go?
I think that, you said something, and when we did the scaling exercise, that I think is really important, that change is hard,
Yeah.
and to give yourself the grace. Give
Mhm.
yourself the grace, because, you're on the path. Just the fact you're listening to this podcast right now is
Right.
evidence that you are on the path to change. So celebrate that, give yourself grace, be your own detective, and look for evidence where you are already on the path to change it. It's much more joyful of a process, and you are doing something. You are moving in the right direction, because sometimes we discount the day to day stuff, but when you look at change over a year, and even a month, or even further, just compounding those little things,
Right.
those little pieces. You're already doing them. It's just much better to focus on those than trying to
Right.
fix or solve problems that, um, yeah, it's just much more joyful. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has been wonderful, Glenn. Thank you so much for telling us about your program and all that you do. And I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been a really great conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Glenn. Have a great day.
You too. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Bye.